We have our cohort starting tonight. Who's Your Oprah? I think we've got like 100 people signed up, so that should be a lot of fun. It starts at 7 o'clock. We're running 4 sessions, so it will be tonight, and then it will be the subsequent Monday nights at 7 o'clock. And we're going to spend the first 2 sessions on mindset and the last 2 sessions on like literally the tactical, practical. How do you build high access, high influence relationships? Like what are the things I do every single day that allow us to have calls with people like Mita Mallick? So I'm excited for that. And we are, I think it's 10 days away from Running Man. So it is not too late. If you want to join me and Kathy and Maggie and Nadine and a whole bunch of other folks, we are going to have an incredible time. RHO will be there. So we're going to have a great time at Running Man. I can't wait. Greg Briscoe, hello. What's up, Phil?
Hello.
Phil, you and I can only talk for the next 6 days, because then my Bears play my Vikings play your Bears, and we can't speak for at least a day.
Scott, I'll send you pics. I'll be there.
Well, hopefully you bring bad luck. That's all I can say. We have a repeat today. So we've had Mita Mallick on before, and she is one of my absolute favorite people. Let me give you the format. For anyone who has not been on either Legend Series or an author spotlight, the format is about 30 minutes of fireside chat with Mita and I, and then we'll open it up to live Q&A. So if you've got a question for Mita, just throw in the chat, hey, I've got a question. Kathy will let me know. We'll tee you up and you can ask Mita whatever your question is. But Mita is her first book was a Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller. It was called Reimagine Inclusion. She is former Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Unilever, et cetera, et cetera. She has her undergrad from Columbia. She has an MBA from Duke. So yes, she's a smarty pants. And she has written another book that comes out, I believe it's September 30th. And it has the greatest title ever, The Devil Emails at Midnight. What good leaders can learn from bad bosses. So I'm super excited to have Mita joining us once again. But before we get started, Kathy, get us going with the intro.
I don't fit in the box, I was born to stand out. Living life on my terms, I've erased all doubt. With passion in my heart and a spark in my eye. I'm the storm, I'm the lightning cutting through the sky. Welcome to the top where the fearless reign, where the dreamers build what the doubters disdain. I'm fierce, I'm bold, I'm the cream of the crop. Bodacious and proud, welcome to the top. Welcome to the top. Bodacious, audacious, no ceiling, no end. Loquacious, vivacious, where legends ascend. An outlier rising, no chains, no block. This is my moment. Welcome to the top.
Well, that almost worked.
Did the pictures cut out on everybody else?
It did. It cut out and it didn't update. So sorry.
Oh my goodness. Mita, we need to see your smiling face.
That's okay.
How are you?
Can you hear me?
We can. How are you?
The music made up for it. It's totally fine. I love your tune.
The music was great. That was actually written and performed by one of our members.
Wow.
When she sent it to me, I literally thought it was Beyonce. I'm like, seriously? Really good.
I love that.
Really good. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me back. I'm so excited. I love this group. I see so many friends here too. Really exciting.
We all love you. How's your summer been?
It's been good. Kids went back to school today. Happy dance, tears. but all good. 10-year-old, 5th grade. Son is 12 and in 8th grade. Yeah.
So much fun. And was I right? The book comes out September 30th.
It does. Correct? It does. Yeah. You're one of the first groups I'm chatting to about it. Sneak peek.
So get your pre-orders in now. There's no doubt this will be another bestseller.
I hope so. Yeah.
You know, I've done as much research without reading the book as you can possibly do.
Okay.
And plus you and I chatted, so I guess that's a little extra leg up I have on folks. But what's interesting is the book is essentially about toxic bosses.
Yeah.
And you actually call yourself out in the book.
I do.
As a leader who, you know, obviously we all have those moments where we're like, man, I could have done a better job. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, the premise of the book is bad bosses aren't born, they're made, and we all can be a bad boss given the circumstances and timing. I've been a bad boss, and chances are so have you. My bad boss moment, I was actually, Scott, at this point in my career, a really good leader. And I lost my dad suddenly in 2017. And we don't talk enough about grief in our homes and our communities, certainly not in the workplace. And I went from a really good leader to a terrible leader. And when you see the book, there are 13 archetypes, all stories of bad bosses I've survived and endured. But how could I write a book, Scott, on bad bosses and not talk about myself? The whole point of the book is we should all look in the mirror and think about the things that we need to work on. And anyone who's lost someone they love, nothing can prepare you for that. And I really buried the grief. I also was in an environment where I showed up to work after having taken, oh, by the way, we had like 3 days of bereavement leave at this company, and I was able to take 3 weeks. My team rallied around me. And a few days back at work, my boss said to me, oh, you have your mojo back. Oh, good, you're smiling again. So immediately it was like, there's not an opportunity to be sad. You shouldn't be sad at work. You're not supposed to talk about the fact that something absolutely cataclysmic has happened in your life. And so all the behaviors that I talk about in the book, I had become like, I was micromanaging. I'm the devil who emails at midnight. I was sending emails at night. I couldn't sleep. I was disappearing for days on end because I was just dealing with grief. I'll never forget, we had this executive leadership team meeting. My team was presenting. 30 minutes before, I'm in the deck changing things that doesn't matter, right? Details and things, just because I'm looking for some sense of control. And so the point of me sharing that story is that you can't separate things that happen at home from what's going on at work. And if you try, I think those things at some point show up and explode, particularly in my case. And so it's thinking about how we can actually give our time and space to heal and grieve from some of those things, so we don't take it out on the people closest to us.
How did you come up with the title? I love the title.
So what's really interesting right now, as you mentioned, it's my second book, and nonfiction sales are down and fiction sales are skyrocketing. Given the state of our country, people are looking, and the world, people are looking for community and conversations. So it's so wonderful what you all have created here. And I wanted to create a business book, Scott, that people would be interested in reading. Like, have you ever heard of a business book that people don't want to put down? I don't know. That'd be interesting. So I thought about that. And then I actually just started staying really present in conversations and talking to people about this idea, and people talking about bosses they had nicknamed, which I have nicknamed. Someone would say to me, I used to send emails at 11 o'clock, and all these things. And then suddenly I started ideating, and the title came to be. And then of course it opens with the first chapter of the boss who only had time for me at midnight.
Such a great title. You mentioned something that I always think is an interesting topic. Most of the time, like if you ask people what's a characteristic of a bad boss,
sure,
or what are you not looking for in a leader, I know that one of the number one things I hear is micromanage.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's interesting to me because I kind of see that in two different ways. I wonder whether that person just doesn't want to be held accountable, because there is a fine line between micromanaging and then just like doing what you're supposed to do as a leader, which is hold people accountable and have high standards. Talk about kind of that duality of that of Mike. What's the difference between micromanaging and holding people accountable?
I love that distinction that you made in the question. For me, there's nothing like micromanagement to squeeze the joy out of work for me. But here's how I define it. I'm going to make Scott the bad boss. I work, which would never happen, but I work for Scott. He hires me for my genius and expertise and to do this job, but then he just decides to do the job for me. So it's this idea of doing someone's job for them. I often see this when people will go from individual contributors to managing people to the first time. Like I'm micromanaging Mita. I'm sorry if you had to work for me at some point. It's horrible. Like I've been a micromanager, but it's like, do we actually coach people on how to go from doing to directing? We often don't. And so people go back to the thing that they know rather than stepping into the thing that they're meant to be and meant to do. But holding people accountable is different. You know, good leaders should hold people accountable, should be clear in what the standards are. You should coach people through mistakes. I was notorious for this. Scott would send me a deck and I would just redline it and send it back. And then he gets it and he's like, well, what does this mean? Versus me sitting with him to say, or sending a note to say, here is why I made these changes, right? Or can we sit down for 10 minutes? Let's talk through this proposal so I can teach you some of the things I'm seeing in here based on my experience that we can be changing. That's the difference. No one wants someone to do their job for them. Then why did you hire me? Right?
Very true. Very true. You know, it's interesting from the research that I did, you talk about that it's less about traits, which I think we often think like, oh, that person is just an asshole. And because they're an ass, they're, you know, that's the way they're going to show up at work. But I think your premise in the book, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's less about kind of traits and more about these learned behaviors.
I agree with that. When I think about when bad boss moments occur, well, taking a step back, we all probably have a natural gravitation towards certain behaviors that can swing the other way. For mine is micromanagement. So what you said really hit home. How do I hold people accountable versus doing their job for them, right? But I know that about myself. I know I can swing that way. And so when you think about when a bad boss behavior might creep up, there's three moments generally. One is that something's happening in the external marketplace. Oh, there's a lot of discussions around tariffs right now. My competitor launched an innovation that is going gangbusters I didn't expect. A merger and acquisition failed, stress, bad boss behavior. Number two, as in we say in my house, poo-poo trickles down. So bad boss, I'm working for a bad boss. This person has terrible behaviors and I am taking on some of their behaviors. As you just said, sometimes it's role modeling. If it's my first job as a leader and my boss is exhibiting bad behaviors, I might actually take those on. And the third, as we talked about, cataclysmic life events, grief, miscarriage, divorce, breakup, moving, someone's ill, you're ill, struggles with addiction, loss of a home, all of those things, right? Those things we cannot separate. They're part of who we are. It's really hard to try to compartmentalize and then try to come into work every day and show up the way we need to.
You know, two people always jump into my head when I have these discussions about leaders. I don't know why it's these two guys, but it just happens to be. And it's interesting because most people would not say they were bad bosses, but I have a feeling that that's because of results.
Sure.
And it's Elon Musk and Steve Jobs.
Oh, yeah.
Like most people, like they're like tyrants, but they've built amazing businesses that have been enormously successful. So I guess, can you be and I don't even know if you'd consider them bad bosses, one of these 13 archetypes, but can you be a bad boss and build a great business?
Well, I've never worked for either of them. And I would say that at what cost? At what cost have they built great businesses? I don't know the full story to know how many people were hurt and harmed, right? Or bodies that were buried or whatever happened, whatever language you want to use, right? Like what happened to people in creating that? And the question is, could you have been a really great leader and done the same? Like, did you need to go that route? And I like what you bring up, Scott, because one of the bosses, I mean, I nickname all my bosses. I hope that they're all good leaders now. I've changed the names, details, times, but I worked for Medusa back in the day, and she was the boss who screamed at me. And up until, and never, not my parents, not my brother, not my husband, not my friends, no one had ever screamed and shouted at me. And here I am in the workplace being berated privately, publicly. This is the boss who threw a Chanel shoe at my colleague. True story. She would throw pens. She would just throw tantrums. And this is like at the height of like working at like this amazing beauty company. And it's interesting because fear drives short-term results. It does. Because I was scared every day and I wanted to exceed her expectations and I thought I could outwork the bully. Guess what? You can't outwork the bully. And she was going to come after anyone. And she was the equal opportunity bully. She went after anyone, everyone. But what happens, Scott, is you get tired of being scared every day. It's actually an exhausting feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's an exhausting feeling. And so what happens is you start to become, you go under the radar. You say, well, it doesn't really matter what I do. I could just produce lower quality work. She's going to yell at me anyway. You start to become disengaged. The candle, as I say, starts to flicker, and then you can see signs of burnout. But fear's not a long-term driver. And so I just wonder why we haven't come to understand that. Maybe because it drives such great short-term results. And oh, by the way, what ends up happening is, as I share in the Devil Emails at Midnight, this leader had been managing Medusa, a team of 12. Everyone leaves within a year of that team. And then the company moves her to run another team of 12. And I'm voluntold. I have no choice. I have to go work for her. And then within 13, 14 months, that team turns over. And so it's interesting because in that case, it's short-term results she's driving, but she's being moved around every single time. Yeah.
Crazy. Of the 13 archetypes, are there a few that are much, much more prevalent in your experience?
We talked about micromanaging. I think that's one I see over and over again. That boss is lovingly named the chopper. It's sort of like the helicopter parent and the helicopter managers that came out of the pandemic. It's just the constant hovering over everything. The one that we don't talk a lot about, which is really interesting, is toxic positivity. And this gets different reactions from people, but this is the boss who was the cheerleader. He was, Scott, the corporate Pied Piper. I loved him. He was the person who wanted to make you go into the office because he would coach, teach, train. And so you would say, how is he a bad leader, Mita? This sounds like a really good leader. But he was like, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You can do this. Everything's possible. And when you weaponize positivity like that, when things aren't possible in the business, it becomes untenable. And the example I give was, we were leading a cereal business at the time. Our cereal innovation is doing gangbusters. People are buying cereal, eating it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't recommend that, but that's what's happening. And our supply chain team comes to us and said, there's an ingredient we can no longer produce. And so that's a big deal because this is doing so well. Customers want it. We have to convince customers to take something else or come up with another plan and just pause the product. It's just not possible. We cannot produce the product. He then, Scott, rallies the troops and is like, we're going to add $1 million to the forecast. We can do it. I was like, well, we can't do it. Like, it's just physically not possible based on the facts of the business. So fast forward, it's my review. I get no merit increase. I get not enough of a bonus to cover my Starbucks addiction. And I get a very low rating because I missed the $1 million forecast. You're like, but we told you, right? And so those are examples in a marketplace where things are moving and changing. You have to be, as Brene Brown says, clear and kind. Continue to update your team and communicate on what's changing. I'm not telling you not to be inspiring, but you also have to be realistic if these things aren't possible.
No, makes sense. Have you seen examples of quote unquote bad bosses becoming good bosses?
I mean, I'm an example, right? I mean, we all are. That's the whole sort of spectrum. It's like bad boss, good leader, bad boss, good leader. And I don't think there are moments in my career where I've been a good leader and perhaps a great leader, but it goes back and forth like a pendulum. And that's where I think we have to give each other grace and kindness, but also recognize when we're slipping into those behaviors.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I look back over my career, I didn't work for a lot of companies, so I didn't have a ton of bosses. But I would say most of them. Like my best boss was probably mediocre at best, but I never really lamented because I feel like I did learn a
Yeah.
ton,
Yes.
and I learned like what I didn't think really worked.
So true.
And so I took those as very positive experiences. And I like how, you kind of frame that as what good leaders can learn from bad
Yeah.
bosses, because I feel like I hopefully became a fairly decent leader. But a lot of that came from working for people that I thought they were missing the mark on some stuff. But because I saw it in real life and in action,
Yeah.
I was like, well, I don't want to do that.
That
So
makes sense.
I learned a lot.
Yeah. I dedicated the book to my kids and I said, one day you're going to have a bad boss and I'm going to hand you this book. And the whole point of that is that we're all going to have bad bosses. We're all going to be bad bosses, but context and situation matters. I'm not telling everyone to resign every time they have a bad boss. When you see the book, 13 bosses, I'm one of them. The remaining 12, 3 of them really impacted my mental health, including Medusa. And those are moments where you have to make a decision. How long are you going to take this abuse and stay?
Yeah.
But a bad boss for me might be a good boss for you. And that matters, right? In terms of how people are reacting to leadership styles. But I will never forget, Scott, like I reflect years later on a boss who I thought was bad, who actually just had high standards and really taught me the power of storytelling in business, but wasn't communicating it perhaps with as much care. So I thought he was like a really bad boss. And it's like, no, he actually taught me one of the most important skills I have today.
So as a leader, where you can be a bad boss for one person, but a good boss for others, I mean, that's a lot of mental gymnastics to try to jump back and forth and say, okay, this is going to work for Jerry, but it's not going to work for Sonny, but it might work for Cassie and RHO. Forget it. It's never going to work. I don't know. Is that possible to do?
No, it's not possible. I mean, I think you have to meet people where they are in the middle. So like if I work for you, you're not going to become me. I'm not going to become you, but we get to learn how we work together on our styles of communication. Micromanagement's an interesting one that we keep coming back to, is that maybe Kathy is a newer employee and needs more hold handing than Mita, but you have a one size fits all approach, right? And so I feel like, well, I've been here longer, Scott. I don't need you to explain everything to me the way you explained to Kathy because she's just joined, right? And so those are moments where there's friction because it's like, well, why are you micromanaging me in a way that I don't need to? And so listen, leadership is tough. You all know this. That's why it's not easy being a leader. And that's also why a lot of people right now, it's tough being a middle manager, and there are a lot of people who don't want to be leaders right now in this environment. They'd rather just be individual contributors, which I can understand.
Are there people that you look to today that might be, names that we would know that you're like, boy, they really do a great job. They model the behaviors of a really good leader?
That's a really interesting question. It's hard to say because if I haven't worked in those companies,
right,
it's like the projection of how they present, right? I'll give you an example. I've been really watching and admiring the Elf CEO. Elf is eyes, lips, and face. And he was on CNN the first week President Trump was inaugurated that week. And he was talking about how, which I've said to you all, and Scott and I have talked about, inclusion's a driver of the business. We've lost the plot when we talk about DE&I, but like inclusion's a driver of the business. And so you want to create a workplace where everyone feels like they can reach their full potential. And then also you want to think about the marketplace and who you're selling to. And beauty is an amazing example of people have all kinds of skin tones and hair and needs. And so how can I unleash that? And you look at how that company's performed quarter over quarter, and also what he's talking about, that seems like pretty good leadership to me. But I think the question then, Scott, is we don't know until we work there. I used to want to work at WeWork. We see how that landed if you watch WeCrash now. So I don't know, right? Some of these people, it's like these cult leaders, right? It's a great point you bring up. A lot of great brands in the marketplace. And as a consumer, I really like that brand or like the story they're telling. And then it's like, I actually have no idea what it's like to work inside that company.
And that's so true. This is going back a ways, but I used to work at Pitney Bowes, so at the time, Fortune 500 company, and we were voted like one of the top places to work, and we were all like, "What are you talking about? Like this place is a nightmare."
Yeah.
So it's very interesting that the outside world could
Yes.
perceive you one way, and
Yeah.
internally we're like, "Are you got to be crazy? Like, you got to be talking about a different company because we're a shit show."
Absolutely. Nicole just brought up Glassdoor. Yeah. Glassdoor, Fishbowl, LinkedIn. There's, you can take it with a grain of salt, but employees are going to tell you, former and current, what it's like working there if you do your research.
What are the biggest takeaways that you want people to come away with from reading the book?
My biggest takeaway is, listen, I've been the person who has contributed to the workplace literature on how to survive a toxic workplace, how to survive a bad boss. It's the number one DM I get from people. Someone sends me a real personal story on something really terrible happening. It's like, how do I survive this at work? And why isn't the conversation about how we can show up as individuals to do better and be better? Like, why aren't we looking in the mirror to say, listen, you might not be Medusa. I hope I'm not Medusa, right? Some of these are exacerbated stories, exaggerations of different traits, but I think we all know when we're behaving badly, most of us anyways, and can we sit in that silence and think about how we can show up differently? That's what I want people to really think about.
Yeah, it is tough to be a leader. And I think books like yours can really help people think about it more, because so many people have just been, put into these roles where all of a sudden you're a leader, but you really have had very little training and
sometimes
just
you know
like
what?
luck.
Yeah. And sometimes, we don't talk about this enough, but my corporate America dream, that I was taught was like, you want a glass corner office with a city view. Hopefully there's a bathroom, couch, fridge. Like, this is like, well, and then you look out and see all the people like reporting into you. And so, and many of us have just, I'll say this, I just failed up. Like, yeah, I had good expertise. That's not what I'm saying. But I can remember the first time I started managing people, there was no one even gave me a book. It was like, you're really good at this one thing. Congratulations. Now you're in charge of all these people.
Right.
And so and that consistently happens. So imagine when you're like a VP of a division, and I coach people often, and I'm like, wow, if someone I never say this, but I'm thinking, someone had told you this 10 years ago, right? Someone had helped you through this. And so there's a responsibility on companies as well as they promote people to help coach them and train them.
And yeah, it's most companies just don't, especially smaller companies, don't have people really devoted to that, which makes it really difficult. What would your advice be to maybe a smaller startup that doesn't have like an L&D department or anything? They don't have anybody in those roles to develop leaders. What would you recommend that they do?
Listen, I think communities like yours are wonderful. There's so many communities out there. It's such communities you can join, right? Books, podcasts, right? I don't think that's an excuse anymore. There's so much content out there. You could easily curate, and I've done this for smaller companies, a doc of, hey, here are like 10 things you should read or listen to. Here's a community you should join if this is your first time managing, or you've gone from managing like 10 people to now 50. And so I just don't think that's an excuse anymore. You might not have budget. I get your point, right? You don't have an L&D team to do proper training, coaching, all of that. And you don't need it because there's so many resources out there.
Before we have a ton of people that have questions. I'm just curious, as you reflect back on Reimagine Inclusion, when you wrote that, it was a different time. I don't know, just any general thoughts on, I just think like, man, we are in a different world. It was an important book then. And man, we're living in a very different
is this
world
being broadcast anywhere, or this is just for the community, right?
This is just us.
Okay, so my first book, Reimagine Inclusion, October 2023, and came back. Thank you, Scott. You had me and supported the first book. And it makes the Wall Street Journal USA Today bestseller list. I don't still think it's an awesome book. I'll never forget, a few weeks after that, my book team and my agent get on a call and they're like, we want you to write a part 2 of this book, Reimagine Inclusion Part 2, whatever you call it. I said, I'm not doing that. And they said, why? And I said, well, I believe Trump will become president again. This is in 2023. And they all look at me like I have 10 heads on. And I'm like, listen, I'm in New Jersey, East Coaster, but if you're watching at that point, what's happening in the country and the tenor and the tone, it's not, and listen, I don't have a crystal ball. I just study culture and people. I was like, this isn't a surprise. I was like, I'm not going to write that book. I don't have any interest in my second book being banned. I also just don't think it'll be received in the same way. And so I wrote this book. And if you read it, you'll see that the foundation of it is still inclusion, because bosses make or break inclusion. And this is where we said we lost the plot on inclusion. What does inclusion mean in the workplace? I work for Scott. I feel valued. I feel seen. I feel recognized. My voice matters. My contribution matters. It's the biggest retention tool. I come for a paycheck. Some of us come for a purpose, and we just want to feel like we matter. Like Scott cares that I'm at work. That's what it's about. And we've fallen so far away from that. But yeah, that's the story of the book, of the second book. And the first, the Devil Emails at Midnight, originally was called What Bad Bosses Teach Us About Inclusion. And I was asked to change the title to What Good Leaders Can Learn from Bad Bosses. And I did. Because you picked
Very
your
good. All right.
Yes.
Are you ready for some questions?
Oh yeah, gosh. I know this is an engaged group.
We have got a mess of people that are like chomping at the bit to ask you a question. We're gonna start with Jason.
Hey, Mita, I'm a big fan, and I first.
Oh, so nice to see you.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm glad that I was able to make this. I saw you in the first time that you came and spoke to Top. I've seen you in other things and heard you speak, but I started following you before that during the pandemic. Actually, the pandemic was going through with Brown Table Talk, and I say this all the time, that Brown Table Talk was one of the tools that helped me change my DEIAB perspectives, because I've been in human resources for years. I want to ask you, because you're season 10 now. So what made you and DC Marshall, because I know all the stuff that was going on even for the pandemic, but what made you and DC Marshall say, I think this is a good time to come out and have this type of conversation with people? So
I'll fast forward. The sad part is the podcast is on pause because the LinkedIn Podcast Network is no longer. So they were providing our funding. We were part of that network. And a number of shows are on pause. But the reason why we did it, I don't know. We finally had the courage. We were having all these conversations and sharing audio messages. And we were with girlfriends one night and we thought, wouldn't this be interesting to make it into a podcast? And then one of our friends says, you should call it Brown Table Talk. And that's really how it started. And we did our first 6 episodes. We self-funded. We put it out there. We were scared. We're like, no one's going to listen to this. This sucks. And then we had you and so many other people enjoy it. And then LinkedIn came knocking. And then we did that for 4 years. But we just wanted to share like some of the honest and raw conversations we were having late nights, weekends with everyone.
Well, I'm a big fan. And thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Nadine, you're up.
Yeah, well, Mita, thank you so much again. I'm a big fan as well, and I'm grateful to be here listening to your message and hearing you talk about this. I am someone who's definitely been the recipient of a bad boss, probably also been that positive bad boss that you talked about, that like negative positivity. But my question is just because I've been in that situation, like I said, and when you have someone, and I've talked to many people since leaving that position, they feel very stuck. They either feel forced to compromise on their values or even act against their values or leave, and they just can't leave. What would be like one piece of advice that I feel like you might have already answered this, but what would you say? How do you handle that?
And to survive a bad boss or survive it. Yeah.
Because they feel like they can't leave.
Well, always have your resume ready. That's my first piece of advice. Start your exit plan. And I'm not going to tell anyone to resign tomorrow. That's just not possible. But we go back to, if it's a real issue with your mental health, you've got to think sooner rather than later what you're going to do. But if you're working for micromanaging Mita, which is annoying, do you just have an expiration date that says, I'm going to do this for 6 months to 12 months? And then guess what? I'm going to actually pull up my resume and put down the bullets I'm going to learn from this job. Isn't that interesting? It's like a future forward work rather than sort of retrospect. It's like, no, I'm committing to this job, working for micromanaging Mita for 6 months, 9 months. I can actually put down what I want to accomplish in this role. And then the last piece of advice I would offer is always continue to work on your confidence. I find that in a lot of these situations, you start to lose your confidence. So whether for me, it was writing, spending time with my kids, volunteering in the community, I don't run, I jog, right? Whatever it is, find ways to like continue to pour into yourself so you don't lose pieces of yourself. And it can be hard when you're in a situation like that. Yeah. Thanks for that question.
Thank you.
Sunny. We can't hear you. Or I can't hear you.
I can't hear either. Nope.
Nothing?
Oh, yes. Hi.
There,
Yeah, you can?
there
Okay.
we go.
Oh my God, what a bookshelf. That's
yes.
like goals, bookshelf
Thank you.
goals.
Thank you. I've experienced something recently that has caused me to kind of step back just in the way that we show up as leaders. And I think years ago, people were used to bosses slamming, and yelling and screaming and berating, a lot of what you had talked about. And then I think we've taken this shift in the future. And I had an experience recently where I had to fire a couple of people. And I was very intentional in how I fired them, meaning that I was very compassionate, but I was very clear. And I think that's a really hard line to toe when people aren't used to that. And so I'm curious, as you think about fast forward into leadership in the future, if you had to redefine leadership in one sentence for the world that we're moving into, what would that be?
Oh my God, that's a big question. I still think it's in service of others. You're in service of others and they're in service back to you. Like, that's what I think it is. And so the feedback you're giving, it's in service of them. And maybe they're meant to do great things. It's just not on your team.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe they're not used to, as Scott said, the accountability piece. Like, we need more kindness. We need more kindness and humility in our workplaces. I'm not saying that erases accountability. That doesn't mean that you don't do work. Like, that's what people, it's not, no, it's with both. Imagine, right? So I don't need to be the leader that slams and throws stuff. I can still be like, Mita, this is what I expect. If you want to stay here and perform, let's just be very clear. And I can do it with a smile and I can do it with grace and all of those things. Yeah. And I think, listen, I'm not an AI agent. Surprise. This is really me. I'm human. So I need to lean into being human, like particularly in the race to embrace AI. And that, like, what does that look like?
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Heather, you're up.
Awesome. I have about 3 questions. So I think I'm trying to focus more on, Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Hi,
okay,
Heather.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'd love to get your thoughts and reactions to this idea of communities or workplace village. I know I've had a number of toxic bosses and a number of great ones. And in both cases, having that village or community around me at work, perhaps, I couldn't leave or, was getting through a project or something, but having others either talk me off a ledge or just be there to vent to, how much does that play into advice to support?
Yeah, I love that question that you asked, because listen, if anyone from my Medusa days called me right now, I'd hang up on you guys, right? And that speaks to bad bosses in a really interesting way, create community. That's like the positive side, because the people that I talk about, the 3 individuals that impacted my mental health, there are people from that time who we were in the trenches. We experienced something traumatic together. I'll always show up for them, even if it's years later. And so, bosses, some bullies will isolate. They try to divide and conquer. Others are like a known problem and are equal opportunity. They just go after everyone. And so it's good to have that support system. I would always encourage people also find support outside and community, because sometimes you start to normalize what's happening as a group. And then you're at dinner with friends and you're casually saying that she threw a Chanel shoe at someone. And people are like, that's not, I remember this. And my friends they're like, what is going on? This is not normal, but you normalize it. So that's to balance the community piece. But it is helpful if you have people at work, you don't feel like you're going through it alone, which sounds terrible, but it's true.
Right.
Great question.
Awesome. Thank you.
Kate McKinnon, you're up.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, Mita. So nice to
Hi.
meet you. I've actually been following you for years. Ever since
Thank
I started
you.
with leadership development. So excited to have you here. And I'm currently writing my first book to help new grads launch their careers and succeed in the first 90 days. So including navigating different generations in the workplace and the new landscape of DEIB. And so I was curious about what your perspective is on the biggest workforce gap that needs to be addressed today.
The biggest workforce gap. I'll pick a controversial view, which is anti-hustle culture. Like, I'm not embarrassed to say I'm sleeping at midnight. Like, this idea that we normalize burning people out, it's just not possible. And let me say this, I have a book launching in less than 30 days. Believe me when I say I'm working my butt off. I am, but I can't do that 24/7, right? And so the foundation of good leadership is like resting. God forbid, sleeping well, eating well, taking care of yourself, exercising, so you can show up and do great work. And I think we're just at odds with that, particularly sort of hustle culture being celebrated in many ways. And I'm not saying that there aren't moments of your life you're going to lean in, of course. But if that's constantly the way we're training people and believing we can, it's just going to end in a way we don't want it to. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can't wait to see your book. You'll have to DM me the link. It's ready.
I will.
Congrats.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Congrats.
Mita, I think another thing that can help is, like, I think you have to identify, you're either like a marathon runner or you're a sprinter.
Oh, yeah.
And so I have a friend,
I love
Kathleen
that.
Griffith, who's amazing. She wrote this great book called Build Like a Woman. And, she's a sprinter. Like, she is, just going to go nuts for a period of time, and then she's going to pull way back.
Yeah.
I'm more like a marathon runner. Like,
me too. Yeah.
I'm more built that way. So for my mental framework, like, I can't do what she can do, but I think understanding kind of who you are helps you not burn out and figure out what works for you.
I love Scott's comment. There's so many great comments. I can't see, I'm not trying to stay present and not read them all, but about manufacturing companies having downtime and maintenance. So should people as well.
Yeah. Martha.
Mita, thank you for being here. I appreciate all the insights, and some of your stories are like, oh yeah, I've been there. I've been that, or I've had to deal with that. So I'm a recovering micromanager, and like maybe many of you are, but one of the things I found out is, as I started my journey to not being that, it was very liberating. It was tough at first because, you have to trust the people that are there to do their jobs and give them the reins. But I did find out that it's very liberating, and it takes a huge weight off our shoulders to step back a little bit and let people do their thing. And however, on the flip side, like, you've got this pendulum that goes totally 180, where you're so hands off that you don't, do the leadership piece that you really should be doing. So how do you walk that line of, staying hands off, so to speak, but still being able to, input when you need to? And is it a matter of asking questions? I don't know.
macro management, right? I talk about that in the book, swinging from one end to the other, where you're disengaged and you're giving people, as a leader, way too much freedom. They don't have enough coaching. I think it's about setting expectations from the start and accountability. We have a deadline for a client in 2 months. Here's the inputs, but more importantly, the outputs. Like, here's what I expect from the output. Let me be clear on that. So I don't have to micromanage the inputs necessarily. And then to do check-ins often. I think what's really interesting is, when do we fall into micromanagement is when someone's not performing. And so that's what we watch for. If you as a leader have set clear guidelines, inputs, outputs, you are checking in, you are communicating clearly, and the person still cannot meet those objectives, there's either an issue that they're in the wrong role, they weren't trained properly, or they're just not in the right place, as we talked about earlier. Everyone's meant to do great things, just not on the team. So I would watch for that as well. Thanks for that question. And I love the self-awareness.
Yeah. Your discussion about, not doing the hustle, so to speak. I'm a chair for a nonprofit board of directors, and I have a market director that reports to me and reports to the board. And I just had the conversation with him this morning, and I said, I really appreciate you accounting every month. At the end of the month, beginning of the month, he sends me a sheet that accounts for his time. And I said, I really appreciate it, but I'm noticing, I noticed you don't have any days where you didn't take off.
Yeah.
You were, even if it was only an hour or half hour or whatever, you didn't allow yourself time. And I said, I'd really like for you to make sure you're allowing yourself at least a day when it works for you to be able to recharge and regroup. So I appreciate that conversation.
I love that. Thank you.
Randy, you're up.
Thank you, Scott. Mita, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
I have a very specific question.
Okay.
I've seen it in the past year twice with two smaller companies.
Sure.
That they'll take, you use the terminology individual contributor, like a salesperson.
Uh-huh.
And when they're good, they try to move them into a position of bringing on other salespeople and management.
Oh, God, yeah.
And I just wonder, is there one, let's just say, can somebody be both really? Or is it really that these companies see somebody, and these are two small companies, okay? It's not like Fortune companies, but is that a common mistake that's made? And are there people out there who can truly do both?
There are probably some people who can do both. Most of them have been trained, or they're self-taught, or they have an interest. What I talk about in The Devil Emails at Midnight, the problem that you're bringing up is actually tied to the manufacturing days and shows how we still haven't modernized the way we think about work. So let's say you and Scott and I were on a line making widgets, and we're making widgets every day. And then all of a sudden I exceed my KPIs for the last 2 weeks. And Kimberly comes and says, Mita, you're so great at this. I'm promoting you. You don't have to make widgets anymore. You just have to watch Randy and Scott and Sonny too. And it's like, well, I don't actually know how to do that. I'm just really good at this one thing. But it goes back to actually a practice from manufacturing days, which we still bring to the workplace, that the only way to advance is to be in charge of other people. And so when I've worked with tech companies, I'm sure you've seen this, engineering departments get this right in some cases. They have an individual contributor track. So you can actually continue to do well and be an expert and gain more expertise. You can get paid more money. You don't have to manage people. And if you do, there's a second track. And so that's interesting as you're talking to companies and working with them to see if that's possible. Because in many cases, you might just be setting up this person to fail. They feel the pressure. Well, the only way to get promoted, Randy's telling Mita, is that she needs to manage these 10 salespeople now. Otherwise, she's going to leave. What if there was another option?
Thank you for the great answer, Mita. In both cases, after the switch, there was frustration in both cases because it just wasn't the right fit. And I'm sitting here trying to advise.
Yeah.
And now I'm learning more and more that it seems like you're kind of one or the other.
And so you can ask that question. You see that Mita's really good at this individual skill, but what leads you to believe she can manage this team? If we asked her, she wants to do that. You're in a great position to ask that question next time.
Right. Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Nice
you.
to see you, and
Thanks.
thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Randy, happy birthday to Ben, by the way.
Oh, come on. You're the best.
Rachel, you're up.
Hi.
Hello. Rachel! Wait, can I tell my quick story? Okay, I have to tell the group my quick story. So I'm sure you all know Rachel's like a fantastic singer. And there was a song of hers that I listened to, and my kids didn't believe that I would know an artist. Because like, how is mom that cool? And then she sent me a video, and it was talking to them, and they were like, no way. You know this, you know an artist? And I'm like, yeah, mom's actually not that uncool. Anyways, that was my story. And Rachel sends me handwritten notes on my birthday every year. I don't even know how she knows my address, but you can stop by anytime, Rachel. Okay, Rachel, ask your question. You're like, thank you. I had to give that. I just thought it was like every time, think of that story.
Or sing your question or whatever, however you want to present it.
You know, love it. Mita, thanks for the time today. There's a question that I have that I would imagine you haven't thought about, which is if someone wants to approach a boss like this. So let's say somebody has this boss and they're like, I need to say something. Is there a prompt, a phrase, something that you have found either in your own experience or learning from others that people have used to initiate a conversation? Because sometimes we make an assumption, oh, I can't talk to that person. They're a terrible boss. They're never going to change. But then part of that is that we silence ourselves and we don't actually speak up or say anything. So I'm curious if there's like a prompt that comes to mind that you found helpful.
I think it depends on the context and situation. There may be, it's not like, can I give you some feedback, Rachel, and you're the VP? That's not going to work. But I could say, Rachel, you sent me this deck and I noticed that you redlined these 3 slides. Can you help me understand in the future what outputs you expect? You know, my team said to me, I know we saw you change these images. Can you explain why? And it's like, I was just a control freak. Like, you know what I'm saying? But like, you can act like a mirror and ask these specific questions. The other thing you can do, people don't like when I say this, it is our job to manage our bosses partially. We have to manage each other in the workplace to help each other. Think about it. Like, you're just trying to help each other out. If you think about, take the managing out. But I had a boss once who would routinely text me at 6:30 a.m. and it would just be like, excited about this project, thinking about this meeting. And you're like, I'm trying to get my kids out. Why are you, whatever it is at 6:30 in the morning, you're at the gym. Why are you sending me messages? But what I did was I retrained her. And so I would never respond to her messages at 6:30. I would go to email at 8:30. And then I would email her back what I was thinking. I then remember starting a Google Doc for the team and at a team meeting saying, hey, if anyone has any fun ideas about future projects, let's put them into the Google Doc. So I think your point is well taken, because there's power dynamics in our workplaces. You just can't go tell your boss you suck or you got to do something differently. You have to think about different ways to act as a mirror, or try to create different tools and techniques that not only the boss will benefit from, but the entire team will as well.
Thank you.
So good. Nick, you're up. And then I think our cleanup hitter is Kimberly.
Hey, Mita, it's really nice to meet you.
Hi.
So my question is, what place, if any, does vulnerability and transparency play in leadership? And the reason I ask that is because, you know, some people say if you're like that, then you could be considered a weak leader and people look at you like that. My last boss, for example, he was like off the hook. Bipolar like me, definitely. And he would always like blow up sometimes, but then the next day he'd be like, I owe the entire team an apology. It just got like crazy. And now that I left and I'm 7 months going into 7 months in my business, how do I like reconcile the fact that I'm now a leader when I never like thought of myself that way?
Yeah. I love that question. I think we need more vulnerability and humility in our workplaces. That does not mean that you're doing therapy sessions with your team every day. If I go back to when I lost my dad, if I had just said to my team, I'm missing my dad today, I'm taking it off. It's his birthday, it's Father's Day. I'm coming into this meeting because my husband and I just had a fight because my daughter left her lunch at home and now someone has to drive to the school, right? All these things that happen, or I'm taking care of a sick parent. You don't have to spend 2 hours revealing, but sometimes then your team's like, is she mad at me? What's going on? And it's like these moments, right? And if you can share these things, actually, you can get over some pretty big losses as a team business-wise, because you know you've each gone through so many other things personally that I think it bonds you in a way that's unexpected. So I would say I wish more of us leaned into that.
Kimberly, you're up.
Thank you.
Hello.
Oh, Mita, I know this is the first time we're ever speaking, but I've followed you. I followed you online and always love what you have to share.
Oh,
So
thank
thank
you.
you. I'm curious. My question is kind of related back to what Rachel brought up. I definitely had the experience of having a transition to a new leader where literally I had been, rising star, hypo, being promoted. And the first thing that leader said to me was, you have a reputation for undermining leadership, and I'm going to be watching you very carefully.
Gosh.
And then she stepped in and went total fear-based, not just on me, but on the entire team. And I've had to do a lot of healing from that one, for sure.
Sorry.
Yeah. Literally, there was a morning when I was visiting, caregiving my dad. He had just been taken to the hospital with a potential heart attack. And I was on a call with her, and and I told her, and she was just asking me about the work. So I'm curious in that context, what would you say to somebody in that situation?
Well, where there's smoke, there's fire. The first time someone disrespects you won't be the last. And so the sooner you can kind of come to terms with that, which is hard because human behavior is like, we can change it. I can't change my mother, brother, husband, nobody. You can only change yourself. So you can't change that boss.
Right.
And so you have to start thinking about, what are the support systems? How long are you going to stay? What's the plan? Work the plan. And my question always is to, where are the other people who are enabling her behavior? You're a direct report, so it's really difficult. But like, all these other people are putting up with the behavior. And that's what's so maddening to me, is that we will let one person stay and protect this one toxic boss who's breaking other people. Yeah. And so thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that story.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. I reflect on it many times because I went to other leaders. I sort of did all the things that there were to do. And in the end, I got let go. But I think that was the right. I
think she was threatened by you. There was nothing you could have done.
Yeah.
And
at the same time, I think the reality of you got to, they talk about the flower blooms when it's in the right environment. And that was not going to be the right environment. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Somehow we magically always have just enough time.
You just run these meetings. These events are amazing. The timing is unbelievable. I'm like, it's done.
Oh man, this is so much fun, guys. Buy The Devil Emails at Midnight, or the devil texts you at 5:30 when he's on his treadmill. Which, Kathy, my apologies, because that is definitely me.
Good self-awareness. I love that.
But what else can we do to support you, Mita? We
you guys
love
just
you to death.
Keep being amazing. You're such a generous community. I love seeing you all online. I just love the love I feel when I come here, and you guys are just awesome. So yeah, if you are interested, please pre-order the book. Please tell your friends, and a 5-star Amazon review is much appreciated if you like the book. If you hate it, just keep the 1 star to yourself. That's cool. Yeah. You don't need to post it. Thank you.
Definitely leave those reviews. I know it's so easy to, forget to do that, but it means so much.
Let me tell you, because you all are, I know many of you are writing books. My book launches September 30th. 50 reviews that week is meaningful. It changes this algorithm on Amazon. 50 reviews.
Let's get it done for the amazing Mita Mallick. Mita, thank
you. Thanks, everyone.
You're the
See
best.
you soon. Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks for joining us, guys. Melissa Carson, good seeing you, my friend.
Thank you.
Guys, Melissa just rejoined us, so we're happy to have her back. She is a powerhouse running a company called Canopy in the HR space, and she's absolutely amazing. Christy, good seeing you. Jamie, good seeing you. Jason, good seeing you. Eagles fan.